for this event is service organizations. And I'd like to introduce our first competitor, speaker number 183, Ginger Gonzaga. Please give her a round of applause.
And then you're the time signal person? Okay. Can I start? Okay. In Ethiopia, starvation has reached the point to where 1 billion children per year will suffer from extreme starvation. In the United States, 4% suffer from starvation as well. And in the ever-infamous town of San Francisco, California, 50% are homeless. Sadly, although these examples may seem very incomprehensible, fortunately, we also can take into consideration that there is a program that helps them. And when we take a look at these utter realities, we can take into consideration what Madeleine Albright, our Secretary of State, once stated, in that if we feed the hungry, we preserve a life. And if we preserve life, we have everything. Although these realities once again may seem incomprehensible, fortunately there is a program that compensates for such problems, that being America's Second Harvest Food Bank Program. Now with this food bank program, we can take a look at it in two specific ways. Primarily, we can review the benefits of the program as well as the detriments. Primarily with the Second Harvest Food Bank Organization, we see that there are, of course, several benefits. After all, if we're feeding individuals, we're saving a life, and that is always extremely beneficial. With this, however, we are also able to take the unemployment rate and put the percentage extremely down. Currently, in the United States, the unemployment rate is at 4%, but the Second Harvest American Food Bank oftentimes helps with this specific problem. By offering people food at the same time, they are also able to give such individuals that they provide food to with a specific occupation. Whether or not it's organizing the food in the specific bank, or if it's simply working for the company in order to gain money to possibly not have to go to a food bank. While in San Francisco on a missions trip, I once had the opportunity to actually work at America's Harvest Food Bank. By doing this, there were several volunteers that were able to organize the food. As we did so, however, we acknowledged that there were also several detriments. When we look at detriments, we see although this may be a very beneficial program, there are several negative aspects that must be taken into consideration. Sometimes such food banks can cause dependency with the homeless or people that are deprived of proper nourishment. At times, people may see that a food bank will offer them food, and therefore they simply can rely and depend and be extremely dependent on the United States for a food source. In addition, upon stacking the piles of food, we noticed that much of the food that was donated to the food bank wasn't necessarily up to par. Our specific job was to take out all of the bread that was moldy. But at times, we may have passed some bread that was moldy, and if this were truly detrimental, it could in fact cause several diseases amongst the people that they were possibly trying to help. But nevertheless, we see that their motivation is what is truly beneficial. Also, in response to the detriments, we see that at times people simply would greatly take this for advantage. Some individuals would claim that their starvation reached an extreme extent, and therefore they needed more food than others, while really they were simply using the United States in order to gain more food. Sadly, in our society today, oftentimes we shun the homeless for these specific examples. But nevertheless, once again, if a food bank is able to offer the food to the United States, we see that at least we're preserving a life, and therefore looking and valuing what is obviously the most paramount. America's Second Harvest Food Bank is truly beneficial because obviously we see that not only is it a United States program, but since it's the Second Harvest Food Bank, it also looks at international levels. We've been able to help these individuals that are starved in Ethiopia. And fortunately, the United States is in fact one of the countries that will help such individuals, while other nations sometimes resort to apathy and simply do not acknowledge them. As we feed the hungry, nevertheless, sometimes there may be detriments. Although we may have some positive motivation, at times it can cause people to be dependent on the United States and dependent on such food banks for a food source. And even if they're not, and we're feeding the hungry, we may feed them some moldy bread that could in fact cause several repercussions. But nevertheless, when we take a look at this service organization that has several positive intents, America's Second Harvest Food Bank, we can once again take into consideration that possibly the benefits outweigh the detriments. Because after all, once again, in the words of Madeleine Albright, if we're feeding the hungry, we're preserving a life. And if we have life, we have everything. Thank you.